Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. As always, the dream team is back. I'm Amber Duke, joined by Niall Stanage.
Great to see you, Amber. It's been a few weeks since we got to do this, and I always enjoy our conversations and debates.
Me too. It's nice to see you.
For sure. Now, ahead this morning on Rising, Alligator Alcatraz, the Trump administration's Everglades-based immigration detention facility, may soon be closing. We'll tell you why.
Plus, the president is floating a midterm convention next year, and the Democrats may be considering it too. What it means for the midterms.
And former Vice President Kamala Harris will no longer be under Secret Service protection after President Trump revoked it just this morning.
But first, we're still learning more details about the tragic, deadly shooting Wednesday at a Minneapolis Catholic school and church.
As police look for a motive, they found the suspected shooter's handwritten journal, much of which was encrypted in a kind of homemade code that included Russian script and English words. Now, according to the New York Post's description of that journal, the suspected shooter, who identified as a trans woman, expressed regret that they were trans, writing, quote, "I am tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself." And continuing on, "I regret being trans. I wish I was a girl. I just know I cannot achieve that body with the technology we have today. I also can't afford that."
FBI Director Kash Patel also posting this about the suspect on X. "Our teams have gathered information and evidence demonstrating this was an act of domestic terrorism motivated by a hate-filled ideology." Patel continued, saying, "Subject left multiple anti-Catholic, anti-religious references both in his manifesto and written on his firearms. Subject expressed hatred and violence toward Jewish people, writing 'Israel must fall, free Palestine,' and using explicit language related to the Holocaust. He wrote an explicit call for violence against President Trump on a firearm magazine. The FBI investigation is still ongoing. We will employ all of our counter-terror tools to ensure this is fully investigated and deterred." In the meantime, the suspect's apparent anti-Catholic rhetoric has sparked a debate in some circles about whether the trans community is anti-Christian, with Fox and Friends host Rachel Campos Duffy saying it may be part of a larger trend of violence against Christians.
The last big school shooting we remember, there's been others, the last one with a lot of attention, was at a Christian school. This is a Catholic school. What happened this summer in Syria in the middle of Mass, in June, at a Greek Orthodox church, right in the middle of Mass. Yes, we need to think about these things happening here. Christians are the most persecuted religion in the universe right now in the world. So that's definitely a potential motive.
Campos Duffy also suggested in that segment that HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. look into the connection between SSRIs, or more commonly known as antidepressant medication, and suicide and homicide. Kennedy was asked about it the next day on Fox and Friends and said this.
We're launching studies on the potential contribution of some of the SSRI drugs and some of the other psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence. Many of them on there have black box warnings that warn of suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation. So we can't exclude those as a culprit.
That response from Kennedy did not sit well with Minnesota Senator Tina Smith, who blasted Kennedy on X, writing, "I dare you to go to Annunciation School and tell our grieving community, in effect, guns don't kill kids, antidepressants do. Just shut up. Stop peddling bleep. You should be fired." A lot to get to, Amber, and we've only about 5 minutes to get to it, so I suspect we won't get to everything, but a lot of hot button issues here. What's your view?
Yeah, wow.
Of it all.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to talk about. Rachel Campos Duffy, I do think, makes an important point, and I'm actually going to broaden out what she said, because what we've traditionally seen in school shootings in the United States is that there are some common linkages between the shooters and the targets that they choose. SSRI use is one of those often common linkages between the school shooters, although not every single one, of course. Another one is marijuana use, poor relationship with their parents, usually some kind of loneliness or isolation, and usually their targets are public schools. It's actually pretty rare for private schools and Christian schools in particular to be the target of a school shooting, except the 3 most deadly school shootings that we have seen in the past few years have all been at Christian schools. The Wisconsin shooting at Abundant Life, the Nashville shooting at the private Christian kids school, and then of course most recently on Wednesday at Annunciation, which is an interesting trend and obviously raises a lot of questions as to why that is. Why has the focus turned from public schools, typically places that the shooter themselves attended, instead to private Christian academies?
Well, I mean, it is the case that those attacks were on Christian schools. Now, it is also the case that there have been an enormous increase in school shootings generally in recent years. There's actually now a database, the K-12 School Shooting Project, I believe, that tracks these and shows how much they have increased. And there have been 2 particular steps up in recent times. It had been around 50 to 60 shootings of some kind, incidents with firearms at schools, up until about 2017, 2018, when it doubled. And then it around the 2021 time doubled again. So now we're up to, 300 incidents, for example, last year. I think in that context, either targeting of Christian schools or trans involvement is pretty minuscule. Now, is there enmity toward Christian schools? I mean, presumably there is on the part of the people who are shooting at them. Whether that represents a widespread problem, I think, is a different question. I also, this is not related to Campos Duffy, but I was in the White House press briefing yesterday when someone, not your correspondent at the Daily Caller, but someone else, suggested that a new form of domestic terrorism should be defined to include people subscribing to trans ideology, which I find both an offensive suggestion and one not grounded in any kind of reality at all. There has been studies done on the number of instances where there have been trans perpetrators of shootings, and according to the Gun Violence Project, it amounted to 1 shooting in every 880 over the past decade. And it is also worth noting that trans people, in fact, are disproportionately likely to be the victims of various kinds of attacks, including assault and things like that. So I'm very skeptical of anything that blames trans people. I also think there is a tendency on both sides, and I would acknowledge this, to suggest that the beliefs of people who carry out shootings are ideologically neater than they are. Oftentimes, I think they're people who are obviously very seriously disturbed and whose beliefs are often just sort of incoherent hatreds.
I do agree with that last point. One of the examples of that was the Buffalo shooter. A lot of people were trying to neatly fit him into some partisan box, but he simultaneously described himself as a white nationalist, but also a left-wing eco-fascist, right? Like, right. Their views are very rarely coherent, right. Because there's some kind of, obviously, mental problem going on there. I think the reason why people are focused on the trans identity is because of the targeting of the Catholic school, as well as with the fact that this person apparently expressed a desire to detransition. And we also know that trans people have higher rates of mental illness, which could be a predicting factor for either propensity to violence or some kind of event in their life, like something to themselves, self-harm.
Yeah, I don't really dispute that, but you mentioned the Nashville Christian school that was attacked, and the so-called manifesto there, which I reminded myself of this morning going through it, is really this selection of writings that are, the writings of an obviously disturbed person talking about things like autism that they had been diagnosed with, then at other times resenting friends who they felt had forsaken them for the friends' romantic partners, just this sort of litany of grievances, really. And I think it can be too easily put in oversimplistic boxes.
I wish we had 30 minutes for this one, Niall, but unfortunately we've got to move on.
We do indeed. Both parties are preparing for a crucial midterm election. Democrats and Republicans planning unusual midterm events. We'll talk about that after a quick break.